Hi, so we're back again, continuing my story of addiction through the 20 years. Going through the previous couple of videos, geez, there's so much that I lost, and I know I asked you to forgive me for that. So there's so much that I didn't tell you. So let me just go back. In book 10 or 11, I was speaking about my sister Debbie that I lived with when I met Liz and moved to Pretoria. In the time that I was staying in Pretoria, my sister got very sick. So, like I said, she had cancer and she refused treatment. She said she's not going through chemo and radiation again. And at that time is when I left her place and moved in with Liz in Pretoria. And just like an addict, I hadn't seen her much after that. I had stayed in Pretoria and done, whatever else I had to do. So I was living in Pretoria. I hadn't seen Debbie. And then I had been told that she's very sick. So I went through there. The night that I went through there, look, at this time my sister Deline and my mother were living with Debbie, looking after her. When I walked in that door and I saw Debbie for the first time, I was in total shock because she had physically changed so much. The cancer had really taken a toll on her, and it really caught me. I wasn't expecting that. So from the minute I got there, it was hard. It was hard to face. This sister gave me all the time in the world, and so it was very hard to face. And they had to wheel her out in a wheelchair, and then she was there. I was there for a couple of days, and then the one evening, my family decided that it's time we need to talk to her individually to basically say our goodbyes, because it doesn't look like she's gonna make it much longer. So yes, everybody went in one at a time and had their little private conversations with her. And when it was my turn, look, I was not clean, but I wasn't using that day or the days that I had been staying there. And so when I went to go speak to her, at this time she could still speak, and also she was okay in that way. And I sat down with her and I asked her, like I said, I'd never forget that she took me into her home without asking me why. Where did I come from? Why do I need a place to stay? She just took me in with open arms. And so I asked her, I said to her, Debbie, that day that I arrived here, you never asked any questions. You took me in. Why did you do that? And it breaks my heart, and it also makes my heart so happy at the answer that she gave me. All she said to me, all my sister replied to that question was, because you're my baby brother and I love you. Even now it strikes a very sentimental chord, and it's heartbreaking to think of. She didn't question anything. She knew what I was up to. I mean, she's my sister, so word had gone around. She knew what I was doing. She knew my faults, and she knew. And yet she took me in. She accepted me in. I left sometime shortly after that and carried on with my life. And I can't remember how long it took. If it was days or weeks, I don't know. But eventually it came to a point where they said, okay, she's very ill, she's on her way out, I need to come out, I need to come through there as well. And I went through, and this time when I got there, by now she had a hospice nurse. My sister and my mother were still staying there looking after her. She was totally bedridden. She was basically paralyzed. I mean, she couldn't move, so she couldn't move at all. There's nothing that she could move. She couldn't talk. When her eyes were open, she was barely focusing on anything. I must just go back a second just to say there were mornings, and my mother told me there were mornings Debbie would wake up in the morning and she would ask my mother, is she still alive? And when my mother told her yes, she would cry. She would cry so much because of everything she was going through, all the pain she was feeling. Although she was on morphine and whatever other painkillers, she was going through a lot of pain, and she just wanted to go home. She just wanted to go to our Heavenly Father and call it a day. It was enough for her. So every morning she'd ask my mom, and every morning my mom would have to tell her, no, you're still alive, and she'd break down into tears. But anyway, this day, so I went through there. I was going to sleep over again, and like I say, she was so far gone. She was just laying there. You know, Debbie, it was so close to her dying. And then that night when we went to sleep, I'll never forget, my mother woke me up, or my sister woke me up 5 o'clock that morning and said, you better say bye, Debbie's about to go. And I'm not sure how long it took me to get up and go to her bedroom, but when I went into her bedroom and I sat down next to her on the bed, and I held her, and I can't remember if I spoke to her or what I said, but I remember saying to my mother, she looks so peaceful. And my mother said to me that, no, Rodney, she's gone. So she passed away that morning. It was you know, you're losing your sister, you're losing a family member, my mom, my dad, my brother, my other sister, we're all there. So it's extremely painful. The hurt and the basic misery around the house was extremely painful and extremely heartbreaking for everybody. You know, it was a terrible morning. It was a terrible morning, as you can imagine, and it had nothing to do with my drug use, but it didn't make it any better. You know, it was just another reason to feel nothing, another reason that I didn't have to feel any pain. Why deal with it if I don't have to? So I took my drugs, and once again I moved on, and I went back to Pretoria. So that part I forgot to tell you. Where we ended off the last time, I'm trying to remember now. But yeah, these stories I know are heartbreaking, and I know are self-inflicted, a lot of them. You know, there's a lot of things I could have dealt with in a better way if I had just been straight. A person fears hurt, and you fear to be hurt by people, and you fear to be alone. But drugging to numb yourself or to be emotionless isn't the answer. It doesn't help. It might get you through that pain initially, but let me tell you, when the drugs wear off, when you start coming clean, all those emotions come back, and all those small memories come back to you, and you got to eventually face that pain. So it's just as bad. Yeah, so let's carry on from where I left when I ended off last time. So I finished off book 15 when I had started injecting myself with heroin, and I started spiking, as they say. It was the beginning of such a crazy time, because now we're talking about a time when I started to feel nothing. You know, I really started to be absolutely emotionless and not really care about anybody's feelings. Look, I had been like that through addiction anyway, but now I'm talking serious a serious void, a serious blackness, a hole of complete emptiness inside. It is so hard to explain to a person the way heroin makes you feel. If you had a on-off switch, I'm sure you've seen Vampire Diaries. In the Vampire Diaries, they talk about his humanity switch. He switches off his humanity switch. This is exactly the same thing, you know, except this is your emotion switch. So imagine having a circuit breaker that you could trip, and that would switch off your emotions completely. That's exactly what heroin was for me, and it's what heroin is for most people. It's a circuit breaker that removes all your emotions. When I say emotions, I mean I'm talking every emotions on the scale. I'm talking about your happiness and your sadness. I'm talking about your anger and your frustration. You know, I'm talking about patience. Every single thing that a person could feel, heroin kills it. Heroin completely smothers it, and you will feel nothing. And this is where the whole thing of consequences begin to mean absolutely nothing to you, because you don't feel anything, so you don't care about anything. And I'm talking now about as far as whether you live or die. As an addict, you don't care whether you live or die. you really don't. When you get to that stage of 5, 10 years of using, 10 years of being on the streets, not living in the gutters, but being on the streets, living at Nigerians, different places, never knowing where you're actually going to sleep and making your way around. It's an absolute disaster. People don't seem to realize that, and that's why so many addicts stay in this rut. That's why so many addicts end up staying for years where they are, because they're not feeling anything. They're not feeling it, and they're not worrying about consequence. And there isn't even a thing anymore of I wish I could die, because that's hope, and hope is an emotion, and heroin kills it. Heroin kills everything. All you're doing is coasting by every day like an empty husk with no soul, and just carrying on, making your different type of plans to get your money for your drugs. And if somebody doesn't help you out of that, or if something miraculous doesn't help in your life will stay like that. It's a sad truth, but your life will just stay like that. So yes, I had started injecting and started buying the heroin myself, and started buying the needles and the syringes. So I became a full-blown heroin user, injecting and all, heroin on my spoon, melting it, doing all the things. It became such a routine that it became one of the things I loved, let's say, as an addict. The whole routine of building up to that, Yeah, so heroin began destroying my life. So this day at Clint, there was some work that had to get done. So I went with this guy that was also using to the customer's house to go get this alarm system installed. And while we were there, both myself and this young man that was using, we were hanging, we were needing the drugs, we were needing the heroin again. So, just like an addict, and it's so embarrassing to say, because it is disgusting, and I hate mentioning it, but we went through the drawers in this customer's house and we found a small digital camera, and I said, okay, I'll take it and go sell it. And that's what I did. I took it, I went to the pawn shop, and I went quickly to the drug dealer, and I bought the drugs. I think the same day, that evening, or the next day, Clint found out about it. Clint had never laid his hands on me, but that day Clint came to his home. I mean, it was his business, so he had every right. He came to his home, and Clint gave me, I'll be honest with you, Clint gave me a hiding of my life that night. My face was swollen like you can't believe. Funny enough, when I woke up the next morning, it looked like nothing had happened. But that night, they had beat me. I was so swollen, and I deserved it. I deserved it. Every single punch that landed on me, I deserved for what I had done. I have apologized. I am so sorry for what I had done. It was the addiction in me once again. And please, it's not an excuse I'm making when I say it's the addiction. It's not an excuse. Addiction controls your every move, your every motive. So please understand that. Yeah, so then I still worked for him for a couple of days after that. He didn't kick me out right away. Nothing like that happened straight away as far as I can remember. But eventually I started going more and more into Rosettenville, and drugging more and more there. And eventually it just became a thing that I didn't leave. I was staying at the Nigerians. I met a couple of people that I used to go out and make these plans with in the day to try to get some money. And that became my home. Rosettenville became my place. Now again, there might be things that I'm missing in between. I'll bring up at a later stage if I happen to remember it. But yeah, this Rosettenville now became my home and my hell. Let me tell you it like that. This became my home and my hell, because by this time now, I was so far gone. I was still speaking to people. Family was still speaking to me, here and there. Things like that were happening. And what started happening now, and this was probably happening before, like I say, I just don't remember very well, but I started being arrested often, And in the beginning, what I used to do is, the first person I used to phone was my brother. And my brother always used to, in a moment, he would drop what he's doing and he would come through and he'd bail me out. He'd bail me out, and somehow he'd get me out from the police station, and I wouldn't have the consequence of it, And the very first time I spent proper time in a jail was Boksburg Correctional Facility. And when I was in Boksburg, even at that time, my mom and my dad, they used to come through all the way to Boksburg, and they used to still visit me and bring me groceries and that, you know. So I still had them then, but that all slowly began to fade because of it became often, you know. I mean, at least once a month or something, I was phoning because I was arrested, and Gavin also eventually had just had enough and stopped helping. You know, he stopped helping, which I don't blame him. And eventually it got to a point where nobody would take my calls either. So I started staying in Rosettenville, and I didn't have anybody then. I had the addicts around me, I had nobody else, and this was going to be my life. Now, there's a lot of things that happened during this time, which is going to be very difficult for me to say. You know, a lot of it's got to do with jails. Like I say, it's been plenty times in and out, awaiting trial, sentenced, plenty times. And then a lot of other smaller things that had happened. I mean, horrible things, fights and robberies, not that I committed, but that was involved in by other addicts. You know, those type of things. It was a hard time and it was a hard life. I lived there for a good couple of years. You know, I made a whole lot of different friends there, which I'll mention later. I'm gonna mention living with them and how things were with them. I obviously won't mention names, but I'll mention that. And then I want to end off this video by again just talking to addicts out there. You know, I know how difficult things are. I know that it seems so pointless to come clean, because not only, even if you could do it, even if you could make it and get clean, you must be thinking, but what are you going to do? You've wasted 5 or 10 years. You don't have anything to put on a CV. You've got nobody to phone as contacts. You've done no networking. How are you going to find work? You know, there must be a lot of things besides heavy emotional things like, well, my kids aren't going to want to know me. You know, things like that. So I can imagine there's so many things that would keep you from wanting to come clean. But it's not worth it not to come clean. You know, come clean for yourself. You don't have to want to do it for anybody. You really don't. You just do it for yourself. There's no joy in using every day. There's no joy in using at all. All it does is rob you of everything. It robs you of your intellect. It robs you of your health. It robs you of your emotions. It absolutely robs you of everything. And this is why I keep on saying I believe it's straight from the devil. You know, I believe it's a wickedness that this world is facing, that is here to destroy us. You know, to destroy families and to destroy loved ones. That's exactly what this whole addiction thing to me is. You know, so addicts, don't give up. You know, don't give up. Keep on keeping on. I mean, you know, there's a saying in the 12 steps, or not in the 12 steps, in rehabs, many rehabs, is fake it till you make it. If you feel like you can't do it, fake it. Make believe that you can do it, and eventually you will do it. Fake it till you make it. There's so many of those sayings that are so true. Let go, let God. You know, let go. Stop trying to be the hero. Stop trying to be the survivor. You don't need to be the survivor. God will save you. You know, you don't want to come out of this and then so that you can brag about it, to say, hey, I made it. You don't want to do that. The same as me. That's not what these videos are about. These videos are simple. It's to show you that look, there's people in addiction a whole lot longer than me. But 20 years is a long time. You know, it's a long time. And I managed to find my way out of it. You know, I found my way out of it. I don't exactly have the answers on how I did it. I know that I never let go of my faith. I know that was one of the key aspects. You know. And then, like I said, what I will be mentioning later is I know it's the people that I now surround myself with, and the women that I find myself with in my life. And all those things will come to you if you need to come clean first. You need to get out of that race towards nothing that you're in and come clean. So this now is book 16. book 17 will follow shortly. I might put a little bit of a shorter book in between. I just want to speak a little bit about other things. It doesn't all have to be about my life. It can just be about us as addicts, you know, and what we need and what we're looking for. And also to those who are helping addicts or caring for addicts, what we expect, you know, which is nothing but love, understanding. So yes, this is the end of this book. Come back to the others. Stay involved. Keep on sharing them to people that you feel might need it. Please subscribe so that I know that people are interested. And let's get back together again soon. Thanks for visiting Ace for Addict. Cheers.